looking forward to sharing some of my experience around, guardrails and different policies and different things that I kept in mind with building my solutions that really helped ease the change and swallowing that pill, if you want to say, of allowing AI into organizations. So I'm very excited. So I'm going to start. We'll go just a quick agenda. When I give all my talks, I like to give a little introduction about myself, keep it light, keep it fun, just so you can get to know me a little bit better, a little bit more on my personal side, less about the professional. Then I just want to kind of set the stage around AI, because when we talk about AI solutions and AI solutions that we're implementing, I kind of like to classify them in a few different buckets. And that's what we'll kind of be talking about in that second one, where generative AI and custom models, because I think what the type of guardrails and governance and best practices and testing that you do varies depending on the type of solution you're working with and the type of models you're working with. So we'll be hitting that on number 2, and then, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, the big number 3, data security. That's a very hot topic in the artificial intelligence space. It's a huge question that leaders in my organization are looking into and asking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data security, and then training and testing. So you have our solution. What should training and testing look like? And then finally, we'll wrap up with, I have my solution in place. What should I be doing once the solution is live, once it's posted, once it's out there, once it's being interacted with? And then, of course, I know we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end, and be happy to address any and all of your all's questions if I'm able to. Okay. So before we get into the introductions, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you all for attending today. You're all taking times out of your day. You're upskilling in this area. Obviously, you could have been doing something else, but you chose to be here. And I like to acknowledge that at the start. Y'all are rock stars. So thank you for attending. Thank you for sitting and listening to a break. I know we're coming up on a break next, so I feel like this is always funny. I'm the one that's preventing you for a break, but it's going to be a good session, engaging, fun, and I hope you enjoy. So thank you for all attending. You all are rock stars. I hope you learned something today. Awesome. So a little bit about me. I am a senior business intelligence engineer in the healthcare space here in the United States. I live in the state of Illinois with my wife, my lovely wife, and my firstborn son. That's been about most of my life these days. Having a newborn is so much fun, just such a bundle of joy. But outside of that, I love watching soccer or supporting football. My team, we actually just played last night in the U.S. Open Cup, and we're going to the finals, so that's exciting. There was a little bit of a weather delay, so I was up pretty late last night. But so outside of that, football and family are the big things in my life going on right now. If you want to find me, I'm somewhat active on LinkedIn. You can find the link there. I also post a few of my solutions in GitHub and a few of the things that I'm working on. So if you want to check that out, there's the link there. I am restricted on some of the things that I'm allowed to post to GitHub, just based on policy for my organization. But what I'm able to post, I post it there. Awesome. So let's dig in. Okay, so back on the onset when I was talking about the agenda, I was sharing how some of these governance and policies kind of approach depend on the kind of model and solution you're working with. So these are kind of my own definitions and the 3 categories that I've classified, just so we're all kind of aligned on the same page. I want to start at the top, make sure we're all aligned. So when I use this terminology, we're kind of aligned on what I mean by that. So I kind of classify different AI that you can implement in your solution in 3 different buckets. That first one being pre-trained models, pre-built models, and custom models. So that first one, when I say pre-trained model, I'm saying or thinking more of ChatGPT. You go to OpenAI's website, you're interacting with ChatGPT, or you might be using um, invoking their API. Anything when you think ChatGPT or pre-trained, and I know Google Gemini is another famous one that's out there. There are several local pre-trained models. So essentially, anything that's already pre-trained, pre-built, and it's a plug and play. And that's what I mean by pre-trained there. Okay. That next one, pre-built. So the model's built, but you have the ability to fine-tune the model to add your own data and tweak for your usage. A good example of this, so I guess I should say too, on that, my organization is a Microsoft shop, so we use a lot of Microsoft products and specifically Azure. So a lot of my examples do revolve around that, but can be applied more broadly. So in the Azure suite, they have several models that you can build and interact with to perform certain tasks. If that's text classification or category classification, vision, bot services. These are models that are pre-built, they're trained, but you have the ability to fine-tune them with your own data. So that's what I mean by pre-built models. It's not quite pre-trained where it's just a plug and play. You have a little bit more customized, you have the ability to customize a little bit more to suit your specific use case, but still using the pre-built architecture. And lastly, we have custom models. And this one more specifically, this is one, it is built, but you train it from scratch and or fine-tune it when you're testing. So the infrastructure is there, but you're feeding it the data to train and test and building it yourself. So the infrastructure is there, but you're supplying the data to train the model, build it up, and deploy it. Okay. So again, we have pre-trained, think plug and play, pre-built, some fine-tuning, custom model, you're in charge. So again, I just wanted to set that stage a little bit because as we kind of talk on these next slides, a lot of governance and policies and best practices of working with AI in your solutions and testing them kind of vary on these three models. Awesome. So jumping to data security next. So kind of what I was talking about at the onset, I feel like it's a super polarizing topic around how data is being used inside of these models. So we'll kind of start at that first model type, the pre-built, the ChatGPTs or Google Gemini. If that's that's the route you're going with, and you do have a pre-built model and you're just looking to plug and play, making sure you're reading the documentation around how your data is being used inside those models. Is it being used to train the models? Is it being used to test the models? Is it being used to verify the models on an ongoing basis? Knowing that is really important, especially in my organization. We are a healthcare company, so we are dealing with sensitive information all the time. So, knowing how the data is being used inside the model, stored, and utilized is very, very important. Again, because we're dealing with personal health information, and there's a lot of rules and regulations around that. So that is a huge, important point, especially in my organization. And if you're dealing with sensitive information, you're definitely something you should keep in mind too. Now, obviously, if that's not so much of an issue, that's great. You have the swath of tons of different providers and options to leverage AI in your solutions. But if that is something when you are dealing with sensitive information, obviously we're a little restricted in kind of the avenues we can go with AI. If that so, it kind of takes out the pre-built, but luckily, at least in our organization, we're able to leverage many Azure AI resources to help implement AI into performing different tasks that we're looking for things to automate that AI can do. So, and luckily, we're able to, kind of keep our data secure. We know the data isn't getting shared. We have there are solutions out there, I'll say. So that's kind of step number one. How is the provider using that data? I know that's a hot topic. Also, the importance around, okay, so we have the data. We kind of covered, the models using the data. Let's say, what are we doing with the data that we're holding inside? Who has access to it inside your company? Because obviously, if you have a solution, let's say, we have a computer vision AI solution, and we're asking the AI model to review an invoice and extract certain information. Well, obviously having good rules and parameters on who has access to the pictures of those invoices can be important. So, making sure you have very detailed and outlined roles of who should have access to the data that you are feeding the model. So again, beyond how's my data being used from the model provider, but who has access to the data that we're supplying the model. And making sure you have very clear parameters and good governance practice around that and have rules in place. Data retention and classification. This one is, again, I work in healthcare, so rules are a little different. We do have data retention policies. I know finance is the financial industry is another big one. Financial and banking, they have different data retention and rule policies. So, making sure you're have proper data retention policies in place to make sure you're not getting rid of data, because that could put you in a really sticky situation. Now, when I say data classification, this kind of revolves around, is this public information? Within my organization, we use a 4-category system. Is it public? Is it internal? Is it private? And is it secretive? And there's different rules and definitions for what data falls under each of those classifications. So that's another really important one. And then helps influence point number 2 is who has access. Is someone, if we're dealing with personal health information, like in my organization, who has access to that, and should they have access to that, can classify it. Or, if it's just an internal, a public data, is anyone in the organization can have it. So, making sure you have those classification labels that then can help influence the access. Okay. Awesome. And then obviously access control. So this kind of varies. I kind of threw in this point because it kind of varies on, if you're storing your data locally in the cloud, making sure you have proper guardrails in place to help secure the data that is stored, especially if you're dealing with personal information like we are. If you're storing it locally, VPN, and so on. That isn't really my area of expertise. I can talk on it a little bit, but that's just kind of throwing that in as a reminder to keep in mind to make sure we're securing our data, I'll say. Okay. And then, of course, if you are going with a more plug-and-play solution, or and you're leveraging and invoking the REST API to interact with that model, making sure, we're probably all familiar, keeping the API keys secure. There are a number of solutions out there. I know it's so nice because, again, we're a Microsoft shop, so we leverage a lot of Azure solutions. They have services in place that help secure API keys and easily swap them in and out. So that's cool. But if you're not leveraging Azure AI resources, that's a big thing to keep in mind to make sure you vault your keys. Okay. Awesome. So going on to training and testing. Now, we're probably going to spend a little bit of time on this slide, a little bit more than the last one. So buckle up. It should be a good one. So we kind of talked about the beginning. We're developing our solution, kind of talking about models, how's our data being used, securing our data, make sure our data is classified correctly, make sure our data is not getting out. So now jumping onto the training and testing, and this does come into play a little bit on the pre-built models, that first bullet I was talking about way back, but mostly is around 2 and 3. The pre-built models, so not the pre-trained, but pre-built models and the custom models, where we have the ability to fine-tune with our own data or train the model altogether with our own data. So one thing that has been really interesting, and it kind of hits the second bullet where I say, warning, do not use AI-generated content. So Stanford University actually did some really interesting research recently around using AI-generated content to train models. And what they found is it could be very, as in their words, they used poisonous. So, kind of throw in whatever word you want there, dangerous, harmful. But what they found is it drastically decreased the accuracy and quality of the output. So I just want to kind of call that out in the beginning. And, some skeptics will say, well, we're running out of data to use in these large language models. So it's just going to, the natural next progression is going to be using AI generated content to train. And then that's going to be the downfall of AI, and it's just going to explode, and see, it's not worth it. We could argue the merits of that argument, but just some really interesting research coming out of Stanford University here in the US. I recommend you all taking a look at it. It's pretty interesting research, but if you just Google or in your search engine look for using AI-generated content, Stanford research, you'll find it. I think they did it in a company with Rice University here in the U.S., but really interesting piece of research on that. Because, again, I know there's been a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of sentiment around how OpenAI is using large swaths of data. They're going to run out of data with training newer models, these large language models. So, the natural tendency of some people is to think, well, what about AI-generated content? Do not do that. So even if, kind of take that and plug that into using our own solutions, if you are using a pre-built model that you're fine-tuning or a custom model, do not use AI-generated content to train, because that will drastically decrease the quality of the output and so on. So, little call out there. So, if you want to nerd out on some reading, I recommend that. So, going back to data quality, and that first bullet, I say do not mix data. So, obviously, training your model and testing your model are two different tests. They should be separated. Your training data should not be mixed with your testing data. Do not do that. It's not as dangerous as using AI-generated content, but to make sure we're producing accurate and good models, you want to separate those out. So have your training set of data, have your testing set of data to run through. Now, obviously, too, the amount of data that you feed it in training does often correlate with a mixture of the quality of the data that you're feeding. It does does correlate with the accuracy of your model overall. So make sure you're so if you're doing an invoice tracking or an invoice extraction model where you're feeding it an invoice and you're asking it to extract certain information, giving it 1 or 2 invoices to train on isn't going to be sufficient. You need several to get the model trained up to produce accurate outputs. So, and obviously that varies. If you're, the amount of data you use for, that example of invoice extraction versus classifying text, you're going to need a lot more data on the text side where you're classifying text versus, the number of inputs, the number of, you can have several dozen invoices that it looks through, but you'll need thousands of rows of data for the text, usually, in my experience with testing that I've done. So, again, don't mix data. Have your training data, have your test data, and that's if you are fine-tuning or creating your own model. Obviously, if you have the pre-built or the pre-trained model, or you have a pre-built model that you're not looking to fine-tune, obviously, just making sure you have your testing data a good amount and good quality will definitely help. Awesome. So number 2, generating harmful and biased content. So this kind of jumps into more of the, this is jumping more onto the testing side, kind of switching gears a little bit on the generating harmful and biased content. So a lot of the models and solutions that we're creating, I haven't really run into this issue. I'm being perfectly honest, but it's definitely something that we should all keep in mind. As AI becomes more prevalent, building trust with our users is most important and should be number one as we think about building out these solutions. There's obviously I don't know if any of y'all seen this, but I always find this pretty interesting. Is like the adoption curve. There's the leaders who jump on new technology right away. There's laggers who kind of want to see it play out and see how it works and then jump in. And then the laggers who when I always think of laggers is like the people who are still using flip phones, who are like, oh, I don't need a smartphone. I'm happy with my flip phone. There's different people on that adoption curve, and helping and making sure we're generating good, accurate results are going to help with that. And part of that is generating harmful and biased content. And that's why we test. That's why we're testing these models, to make sure we aren't producing any harmful or biased content. I know a lot of the pre-trained models, like the ChatGPTs and Gemini. If you're just doing the plug-and-play approach, a lot of those have guardrails in place already. But when you're going the custom route or even fine-tuning, you want to make sure you're thoroughly testing to make sure that you're not generating biased content, especially if it's a public-facing solution. A lot of the solutions that I've generated and I've created and developed are all internal. So it's not that it's less important. It's important across the board. But just keep that in mind, especially because if it is public, you do run into reputation issues if something did come out. So really making sure and doing very thorough testing and really testing the limits to make sure we're not generating harmful or biased content. Awesome. So and then I kind of want to touch a little bit about accuracy and prompt engineering specifically. This is a little bit more important around this is more focused on the pre-trained side, the more plug and play, but it still applies across the board. So again, this is like one of those, I feel like there's people in both camps, how AI is it's being revolutionized so fast that prompt engineering isn't really needed. At least in today's world, I tend to be the camp that implementing good prompt engineering practices is very important still. Obviously with time and as artificial intelligence becomes, is the plan where it's more intelligent, or as we reach artificial general intelligence, this need might go away. But definitely, at least in today, and a lot of the solutions that we're making, implementing good prompt engineering practices and writing good prompts and good requests, um, does, in my personal opinion and my anecdotal experience, drastically improve accuracy of the output. So, um, I kind of stole this from Microsoft. So they kind of have these four different categories or areas of the prompts that you're building. So they start with the system message, making sure you're starting with clear instructions at the top of, setting the stage, setting clear expectations for the model, say, here's what we're looking to do. And then you have your primary content, which is your the request itself. So you set the stage, you're providing the content. The secondary content would be like any additional context you're looking to provide, and then the grounding content is the fine tuning. So if you have any tuning data that you want to supply or tuning information, you would give it there. So, like I said, this is probably going away and it's going to become less and less important, but at least in a lot of the testing that I've done and different people in my organization, it's still quite prevalent and does produce more accurate results in the end. So, awesome. Okay, so we have our solution. We've trained it. We've tested it. What does the ongoing monitoring look like? We've deployed our solution. It's out there. It's being utilized. Unfortunately, we're not done because could be the most, depending on where you stand, could be the most important part of the entire process and where the real trust around artificial intelligence is built. Is continuing to improve your model. If you need to go back and retrain it or provide new data to make it more accurate, and having that ongoing performance to make sure your users are having a good experience. So since a lot of our solutions that we built are kind of built in the Azure architecture, and we're using Azure AI services, it's a little bit more integrated, but how are we measuring the performance, the accuracy and the confidence of our models and making sure those are at acceptable levels, and making sure that's being monitored ongoing. Again, this is a huge thing for trust. So, and obviously when I say accuracy, measuring how accurate the output is, and then the confidence, that's an output that's usually given with the model of the confidence level that the output is correct. It's a probability or percentage of probability that the output is correct. So, tracking that over time and making sure, our outputs are good, giving good information to users who are interacting with the model, so on and so on. That's very, very important. We've developed, with a lot of the solutions that we manage, we've developed our own custom monitoring solution to help monitor performance. Again, we're kind of early adopters in my organization, so we've decided to kind of take that extra step to really make sure we have good reporting on the performance and accuracy of the models that we're using in our solutions. So we're, in a lot of ways, kind of we were the guinea pigs in some ways. So we just kind of took it upon ourselves to take that extra step to make sure and report ongoing to leadership that, hey, this is actually working. Look at this. Look at our accuracy. Things are going really good. Here's what users are saying, so on and so on. So depending on the type of model, especially if you're building a bot, having the ability to report back issues, again, kind of going back to the, if there's an issue or if there's accidentally biased content or harmful content that was produced, having the ability to report that back, super important, and being able to monitor that is huge. I haven't personally built any bots, but we do have We do use several models that generates generative AI, so it's generating summaries of a number of different things. Can't really go too much into detail, but it is artificial intelligence generated content. So we did put in this reporting capability just as a level of building trust. If there's something that was produced that's could be construed as inaccurate or biased, we want to know that so that we can take that back, and if we evaluate, if we need to do further testing, training, and so on. So having that feature is a huge way of building trust and knowing that as we're listening to our users. Proper disclosures. So this is something that we've kind of taken on ourselves in our team. I know there's a lot of depending on where you fall on the spectrum is maybe not totally necessary, but in all of our solutions we do disclose like, hey, this is artificial intelligence generated content. This could be considered inaccurate. If you do run into an issue, back to the reporting, you can report it here. We just like to play it safe in that aspect. It's if you've heard the saying, it's better safe than sorry. So we just kind of take the approach that we'd rather be upfront and just disclose that this is artificial intelligence, or if you're using the invoice example, making sure if you're doing that route, you want to do a disclosure. Say, hey, this artificial intelligence generating, scanning the document and extracting information. This might be incorrect. Double check. Again, it depends where you fall on that one. We just kind of take the route of it's better to disclose than not. But that could be your own, kind of evaluate that on your own. And then, user interactions and guides. I'm pretty plugged in to several different developers. So again, we're a Microsoft shop, so I'm kind of really plugged into Copilot and what they're doing there. And why I bring up user instructions and guides and training is the sentiment is starting to become how there's like a mismatch of expectations of what certain copilots can do for you, or different chat services. So, it can sometimes help to have these in place of, if it's training or user interaction, to help users know how to interact with your models. If it is, a chat service, or if it is a custom model that you build, whatever it is, just to help them get the most out of the solution. It's at least helped us, and we've seen a much higher satisfaction when we've been able to help guide users on how to interact with artificial intelligence. If it is a chat service, helping them write better prompts. If it's obviously if it's like a custom model that's doing document processing, that's a little different. This is mostly falls under the instances where you're doing more of a interaction or generative AI, where you're putting in requests. But that has been proven very helpful. We've done some testing where we haven't given any sort of training, just kind of let people go at it, and others where we have, and we've seen pretty significant differences in user satisfaction with interacting with our solutions when you've kind of skilled them and they've seen better results. And we've all probably experienced that. You're interacting with a bot, you give it some vague prompt, and it's more often than not pretty accurate, but it does vary. We'll say, again, back to the prompt engineering, being clear and descriptive definitely does produce more accurate outputs. So just something to think about there too. Awesome. So this is that was the last slide of my presentation. Again, kind of went through beginning to end, based on the 3 different model types. If you did enjoy the session, love for you to scan the QR code and take the survey. I appreciate any feedback on today's session. I want to make it better. I'm the kind of person all about continuous improvement. So if you have any feedback for me, love to hear it. And I think we're going to have a little conversation and maybe take some questions. So thank you for the time again today. I know you could have been elsewhere, but I really appreciate it.